Right now, you probably think of a gun as a sleek piece of modern engineering. You see one in an action movie, or maybe you watch an Olympic shooter, and you see someone pull a tiny metal trigger with a single finger to unleash instant, catastrophic explosive force. You barely give it a second thought. It feels completely normal. But here's the strange part. For thousands of years, if you wanted to defend your home or go to war, you couldn't just pull a tiny lever. You had to physically swing a heavy iron sword, hurl a spear with all your strength, or spend a decade training your back muscles to pull a 150-pound longbow until your actual skeleton deformed. War wasn't about mechanics. It was about raw, grueling muscle power. Before this terrifying invention, humanity had to rely on face-to-face brutality, exhausting physical exertion, and years of relentless training just to throw a piece of metal across a field. The question is, how did an accidental recipe for an immortality potion turn into the most destructive tool on the planet? And how did a simple bamboo stick evolve into something that completely reshaped human civilization? To answer that, we have to go back to a world where weapons were powered entirely by muscle. We have to travel back to 9th century China during the Tang Dynasty. And the origins of the gun do not start with a ruthless general or a master blacksmith. They start with peaceful monks trying to live forever. Taoist alchemists were obsessed with creating an elixir of immortality. They spent their days mixing all sorts of bizarre ingredients in ceramic jars, searching for a mystical potion that would grant eternal life to the emperor. One afternoon, a group of alchemists decided to combine 3 specific ingredients: saltpeter, sulfur, and charcoal. They heated the mixture over an open flame, fully expecting to discover the secret to eternal youth. Instead, they got a massive explosion. The mixture ignited instantly, blowing up the furnace, burning the monks' hands, and singing their eyebrows off. An ancient Chinese text from 850 AD actually warned future alchemists about this exact concoction, noting that mixing these 3 items would result in scorched skin and burned houses. They called this volatile black powder huayao, which literally translates to fire medicine. Think about the sheer irony of that moment. In their desperate search to find a cure for death, these monks accidentally invented the most efficient killing agent in human history. At first, nobody thought about weapons. They used the fire medicine for signal flares, medicinal ointments, and fireworks to scare away evil spirits during night festivals. But it didn't stay a party trick for long. By the 10th century, China was facing constant military threats from neighboring empires. Some clever military engineer looked at fireworks and had a dark realization. If black powder could throw sparks and make a loud bang, why not pack it into a tube and point it at an enemy? Enter the fire lance. This was the distant, primitive ancestor of every firearm on Earth. And it was ridiculously simple. Mechanics took a long bamboo tube, packed the bottom with gunpowder, and filled the rest of the tube with a nasty cocktail of shrapnel, porcelain shards, small rocks, iron scraps, and toxic chemicals. Then, they tied the bamboo tube to the end of a traditional spear. When an enemy soldier charged at you, you lit a fuse at the back of the bamboo. A fountain of flame, smoke, and sharp porcelain blasted out the front, blinding and burning anyone within a few feet. Except, there was one major problem. The fire lance wasn't really a gun yet. It was more like a handheld flamethrower attached to a stick. It only had an effective range of about 6 feet, and after one blast, the bamboo tube burned up or split open. It was a one-time surprise. After that, you were just holding a regular spear. Yeah, I think I'd prefer a shield, thanks. Still, the idea was planted. For the next 2 centuries, soldiers kept experimenting. They realized that if you trapped expanding gas behind a solid projectile inside a sealed barrel, that gas would shove the object out at terrifying speeds. To do that, though, bamboo wasn't going to cut it anymore. They needed something much stronger. Around the late 13th century, Chinese blacksmiths made a crucial leap. They stopped using fragile bamboo and cast the world's first metal gun barrels, out of bronze and iron. The earliest surviving metal firearm ever discovered is the Heilongjiang hand cannon, dating back to 1288. It looked like a heavy, hollow metal vase stuck on the end of a wooden pole. And using one was a complete nightmare. To fire a hand cannon, you needed 2 hands, just to hold the heavy metal pipe steady against your body. But to ignite the powder inside, you needed a third hand to touch a burning hot wire or a lit piece of rope to a tiny hole in the back called the touch hole. So, battles involved two soldiers working as a team. One held the heavy pipe, aiming vaguely in the direction of the enemy, while the other soldier ran over with a glowing ember and touched the hole. These early metal guns were wildly inaccurate. The lead balls bounced loosely inside the oversized barrel, flying off in random directions. You were just as likely to hit a tree 50 yards away as the soldier standing right in front of you. Worst of all, if you packed too much powder into the chamber, the metal barrel would violently burst like a pipe bomb, blowing off the shooter's fingers. Not exactly a great trade-off. So why did armies keep using them? Because of the psychological terror. When a line of hand cannons went off, the deafening thunderclaps, blinding flashes, and thick clouds of sulphurous smoke frightened warhorses and terrified enemy infantry, who had never heard a noise that loud in their lives. By the 14th century, the secret of gunpowder leaked out along the Silk Road and through Mongol invasions, spreading into the Middle East and Europe. And Europe was about to take this clunky metal pipe and turn it into a civilization-defining machine. Here's what makes this so important. In the 15th century, European gunsmiths solved the three-hand problem. They invented a mechanical lever attached to the side of the wooden stock. When you pulled the lever with your index finger, it mechanically dropped a burning piece of slow-match rope straight into the touch hole. This was the matchlock, the very first true trigger mechanism in history. For the first time, a single soldier could keep both hands on the weapon, look down a crude sight, and pull a trigger to fire. And that tiny mechanical pivot completely changed human society. Think about how warfare worked in medieval Europe. For centuries, the battlefield was dominated by wealthy armored knights. A knight spent his entire life training, wore thousands of dollars worth of custom steel armor, and rode giant war horses. A handful of knights could easily trample hundreds of uneducated peasants. The matchlock firearm completely destroyed that social order. A lead bullet fired from a matchlock could punch straight through a knight's expensive steel chestplate like paper. And unlike an archer who needed 10 years of grueling practice to build the shoulder muscles required to pull a longbow, an untrained peasant could learn to load and fire a matchlock in a single weekend. Nobility was officially obsolete. Knights were done. Empire after empire realized that money spent on steel armor was useless. Whoever had the biggest factories producing thousands of cheap matchlocks and training thousands of ordinary peasants could conquer the world. This gave rise to the gunpowder empires, the Ottomans, the Mughals, and European colonial powers, who used mass-produced firearms to rewrite the map of the globe. Yet, early guns still had a massive flaw: speed and weather. Loading a matchlock was an agonizing 20-step process. You had to pour loose gunpowder down the barrel, stuff a cloth wad down, drop the lead ball in, pack it down with a heavy ramrod, prime the pan, and pray that it didn't rain. If a sudden rainstorm hit, your gunpowder got wet, your lit match went out, and your state-of-the-art weapon became a useless wooden stick. That's actually where the phrase, "keep your powder dry," comes from. It took another 300 years of incremental engineering to solve this. In the 1830s, American inventor Samuel Colt popularized the revolving cylinder, allowing a shooter to fire 6 shots in seconds without reloading after every single pull. Then came the ultimate breakthrough, the self-contained brass cartridge. Inventors realized they could combine the lead bullet, the precise amount of gunpowder, and an impact-sensitive primer cap into a single waterproof brass tube. Suddenly, you didn't need loose powder, ramrods, or glowing ropes. You just slid a brass cartridge into a steel chamber, closed the action, and pulled the trigger. The gun had officially become a sealed, reliable, lightning-fast piece of industrial machinery. So here's the full picture. First, ancient Chinese monks accidentally blew up their lab while trying to make a potion for eternal life. Then, soldiers tied bamboo tubes full of shrapnel to spears to create handheld flamethrowers. Next came heavy exploding metal pipes that took 2 people just to fire one wild shot. Then, the matchlock trigger allowed untrained peasants to punch holes straight through medieval knights. And finally, industrial brass cartridges packaged powder, primer, and bullets into the reliable instant machines we know today. The next time you watch an action movie, or see a sleek piece of modern machinery, remember that the trigger under someone's finger is the end result of a 1,000-year engineering chain. It all started because a few monks wanted to live forever, and accidentally created the very thing that wasn't going to let us. If you learned something new today, maybe leave a like. See you in the next one.